how's it going? So today's video is going to start a little different. We're not going to do a proper intro this time. We're just going to jump right into the build. So I wasn't originally going to make a video about this, but then I decided, you know what, I'm going to go through all the trouble anyway, so I might as well put it out there. Maybe somebody out there wants to see how this could be done. So today we're going to be making Billy the Puppet's head from the Saw franchise. And this is actually something that I wanted to make for a really long time, but never got around to it, so let's check that off the bucket list today. So I'm going to start by sculpting the head out of clay, and to minimize the amount of clay that I need, I'm going to wad up a whole bunch of plastic bags and tape, and then kind of use that as a filler so we can just put clay along the surface, so it's a common sculpting technique. I've actually never done it because I couldn't be bothered. It seems like a lot of work, but we're going to do it today. You'll probably notice that my narration is definitely not scripted this time. So, sometimes it is, sometimes it's not, but I'm just shooting from the hip on this one. But anyway, hey, look, there's some monster clay. Now, if you're unfamiliar with monster clay, it's actually a really good clay for sculpting detail work and stuff, which, normally would be good. Billy's kind of lumpy and not very detailed, but still I'm going to use it anyway because normally it would be good for that type of thing. And what I really like about it is it has some wax-like properties where you can heat it up and it will melt or get soft if you don't heat it up too much, and then it'll cool back down and be solid again, which makes it really easy to work with. You don't have to do all that kneading and stuff you would have to do with other clays. It's really nice. So the next step here, and my least favorite step by the way, was to flatten out a bunch of pieces of clay to then put all over the wad of plastic bags that we got here. I really hated doing this. It's not the hardest thing in the world, but it's just, at the beginning it doesn't stick to the bag well, you just got like a piece of clay sitting on top of it and it slides around. I cut all that out so you didn't have to deal with all that stuff like I did, but it was very annoying to get started with. But it'll be worth it in the end, Art always is. But eventually I did get it all covered, and then I used the heat gun to heat it up a little bit more, make it soft so it was easy to smooth out and make it one solid piece. By the way, I apologize for the animal noises that might be slipping into the audio. There is a stupid dog and a stupid crow outside, and they will not shut up, and there's nothing I can legally do about it, so we're just going to have to endure. I appreciate you going through this with me. But anyway, now we're at the stage where we're adding all the details. Billy's a really cheeky boy. He's all cheeks and nose, so add a bunch of clay on to make that shape. And what I like about it is it doesn't have to be super refined. Again, this isn't a knock against Billy's design. I love Billy's design, but he is very handmade, which is perfect because that's what I do. Also, a good tip to point out, this is going to be made out of plaster wrap, the final face. And when you're doing that, you want to make sure that the thing you're sculpting that you're going to cover in plaster wrap, the details have to be a little bit thinner than what you want the final result to be, because as you put the layers of plaster wrap on it, it's going to thicken out everything, because you're adding more material on. So like his nose and his eyebrows, I want to make them a little bit thinner so that they're the right thickness once the 3 or 4 layers of plaster wrap are put over it. And that concludes the useful tips I have for this episode. Nah, but as far as sculpting goes, there's really not much to say. This was mostly done completely by hand, and this is the only part that I used a tool for, just to make the seams in his jaw. That's actually why I decided to do this one, because it seemed like it would be a nice, simple sculpting project, that wouldn't take too long. And it really didn't. The entire thing, like the setup and everything, maybe took me 2 hours. Not bad. And with that, we can start the plaster wrap. And to do that, all you're going to need is a bucket of water, a roll of plaster wrap. I cut it up into a bunch of pieces, just get it all ready before we start because your hands are going to get wet and you don't want to be cutting this apart when your hands are wet because then it's going to activate the plaster. It's a whole ordeal. So trust me, just do some prepping, get all the stuff ready beforehand. I also cut some smaller strips because experience has taught me that I will wish I had some small pieces at some point during this. With all these curves, definitely. Also, before I begin putting on the plaster wrap, I cover the entire sculpt in Vaseline. This will be sort of like a release agent, and it'll make it a lot easier to get the clay out of the plaster wrap once it's all dry. I've done some life casting before, and the first time we didn't use Vaseline, and the plaster wrap kinda stuck to the model like a band-aid. So yeah, definitely want to use some Vaseline. Then to use the plaster wrap, you simply dip it in water. My preference is to use warm water because warm water makes plaster cure quicker. I'm not sure why that is, but it does. And then you just start putting it all over your sculpt and just smoothing it out and trying to get it to conform to the sculpt as best you can. And we're going to do, like I said, about 3 or 4 layers of this. I think I ended up doing 4. And as you're putting the pieces on, you want to have them slightly overlap the previous piece that you had put so they, makes it stronger that way. They're all touching each other, bonding. And it's good. And you want to try to do this all while the plaster wrap is still wet. You don't want to do one layer and then come back later after it's dried. You want to just continually do it and build up the layers. Now you may have noticed that I left some seams around the jaw. That is because I'm going to cut that part off and I'm going to finish casting that and the plaster up separately because I want the jaw to be articulated. You know, Billy's got to be able to talk, and to do that he has to have a mouth that moves. Which is a super obvious statement, but I don't know, I'm trying to fill time here, you know, give me a break. So once the jaw was removed, I just added a couple more layers to build up the sides. I didn't want to go too thick with it because remember, if I build it up too much, then it might not fit back into the void where his jaw goes. And then I mixed up a bit of plaster, which is going to be kind of like a really watery paste that I'm going to then coat the whole thing with, because the thing about plaster wrap is it's bandages that are covered in plaster, so it still has a very bandagey texture. So if you make a little bit of a liquidy plaster that you can then spread over this, you can get rid of that and give it a more smooth look, or at least as smooth as Billy can look, you know, being a little lumpy boy. And then once I had the surface looking the way I liked it, I let it dry overnight just to be safe, and then remove the clay. I didn't film that part because the angles I had to get to pull it all out really weren't great, you couldn't see anything, but here's the finished result, and you can see that because of the Vaseline, barely any clay stuck in there. There's a couple little pieces here and there that I gotta pick out, but overall it was pretty easy to remove. Then I gave the whole thing 2 coats of satin black spray paint, and also painted some of these little wooden ball things to act as the eyes. Fun fact, in the original movie, Billy's eyes were made out of ping pong balls painted black. I found that out after I used the wooden ones. Then I went over the whole thing with 2 coats of white acrylic paint. I'm not being too thorough about it because I want to leave some little parts where a little bit of black is showing, and you know, some of his little, I guess, crevices, would that be the right word? So not quite dry brushing, well definitely not dry brushing, but you know, not doing a solid, good paint job. But after a while I noticed that it was leaving a lot of streaks from the brush that I really didn't like, so I used a paper towel and kind of dabbed over all of it, and that gave me more of the texture that I was looking for. And then after that I applied 1 more coat with the paper towel, and I was pretty happy with how that was looking. And then it was finally time to do the thing that I was most looking forward to about this project, which was painting the spirals that are on his cheeks. Like, I don't know why, but I absolutely love these spirals. Like, I love when creepy things, like, have a little cutesy element to them. You know, I feel like it makes it just feel even more horrible. And I don't know, is that the spirals do that for me, and I love them. And I'm not sorry for it, I'm not apologizing. Also, Billy has a little lipstick smile, so I painted that on too. I also painted his eyes, but I did that off camera. That I will apologize for, but I feel like after all we've been through together, you can imagine how that went. You know, you got this, you know. And the next thing to do was to fasten these eyes in his head, which I wasn't really sure how to go about that at first, so I ended up just kind of balancing them in there and tacking them in with some hot glue. I should probably get some craft foam or something and reinforce it, you know, put it on the eye and then glue it on the insides of the walls of the head to really fasten them. I'll do that later though, I didn't have any craft foam on hand. I know, shocking, you know, but you know, it is what it is. But that's not important right now, we have more pressing matters to deal with, like, how are we gonna make Billy's mouth move? I feel like this build has been pretty accessible so far, and I want to keep it that way. Usually I would probably use wood or something like that for this, but cardboard I think will do just fine if we layer it up enough and make it sturdy. So I'm going to make a rod that's going to go up into his head, and then we're going to mount a pivoting rod, a much smaller one that's going to attach to the inside of his jaw. And hopefully we can line that all up right. I'm not going to measure, I'm just going to kind of eyeball it and, you know, go with what feels right to me. And we're going to try to get this, what should be precise mechanical thing working, with no precision at all. The jaw is really lightweight, so a rubber band should be plenty strong to make it return back to its original position when we pull on it. So the plan is to, put a rubber band, then tie a rope around the bottom, run that down the rod, and then we pull on that and let go, the rubber band will pull his jaw back, and that'll create the speaking motion that we want. I feel like I can never explain these things good, but that's what the video is for, right? The visual cues help a lot. Also, I should mention, I don't know if hot glue is the best glue to be using for plaster. I did some Google searching, some things said that it worked, some things said that it didn't. So far, it's been about a couple days I've been working on this and it's been holding up pretty good, but I feel like I should just let you know. I've read that Elmer's glue also works really well. The problem is that you have to have a way to hold it in place because it slowly dries. Maybe you could use some hot glue to kind of tack it on in the corners while the Elmer's glue slowly dries. Maybe get a stronger bond that way. I don't know, just letting you know because I don't know. Also, once I mounted the rod in there, the head was a little wobbly because, you know, it's cardboard, so I put a couple little cross beams here and there to kind of give it more support, and that made it pretty sturdy. And then finally we came to the most intimidating part of this build for me, which was applying the hair. I've done some cosplay stuff before, but I never really did anything with wigs, so I was a little nervous about this, but you know, you only live once, so I just went right for it. Used some hot glue to glue it onto the scalp. I left part of this unpainted because you don't want to put glue on top of paint, so I didn't paint the back of his head. And then I just started chopping away. You know, Billy's hair is a little crazy, so I feel like I had some leeway here. And after a few cautious cuts, I started to, you know, get more of a feel for it, and eventually I actually found myself getting really into the whole haircutting process. And so then I was like, girl, if he ain't gonna be there for you now, then there ain't nothing a ring is gonna do to fix that, you know what I'm saying?
Unbelievable. And she could do so much better.
Hey, preaching to the choir, but, you know, people are gonna do what they want to do.
Exactly. In the end, the choice is hers.
I see what you did there.
I knew you would.
Sometimes I drink when making videos. But yeah, after that, threw a little hairspray in there to give him that glorious volume, and he was done. Also, I put a gloss clear coat over the face to protect the paint job. Did that before I put the hair on, but yeah, that's it. Hopefully you enjoyed the video, and good night!